Thank you for having me here, and thank you for still being here at this stage of the day. I appreciate that I am probably the main thing standing between you and your afternoon tea, so I will endeavour to keep to the time frame. I'm the second lawyer that you've been called on to listen to today, so the first speaker was a lawyer, and so was the second one, the final one, that's me. That seems to me significant, although what it signifies I haven't got a clue. If anyone's got any suggestions about that, perhaps tell me after. I'm a lawyer, a tax lawyer. I don't know much at all about sugary drinks or about health, but I do know a bit about tax. And my objectives today are to attempt to answer two questions. First, would it be a good idea to tax sugary drinks? If so, who should pay? What exactly should be taxable, and what should be the rate of tax? The idea of taxing sugary drinks is prompted by two main aims. The first is a kind of soppy left-wing nanny state argument, and the second is a kind of brutal right-wing economic argument. The soppy left-wing nanny state argument is that sugary drinks are harmful to people's health. They should therefore be discouraged from drinking them. That a tax will induce firms to increase their prices, and that higher prices will reduce demand and consequently consumption. In other words, one of the aims of the tax would be to protect people from themselves. The brutal right-wing economic argument is that sugary drinks are harmful to people's health, and they consequently impose a burden on the health system. So if I consume excessive quantities of sugary drinks, that imposes a financial burden on you, the taxpayer. And the language used by economists, not taxing sugary drinks imposes a harmful externality. In other words, users of sugary drinks ought to pay. Some alternative means of dealing with this issue. One would be an outright ban. We've heard a little bit about how one jurisdiction has gone about that this morning. That might be a little harsh. Another possibility might be ban in some circumstances, for example, schools. The third might be minimum prices, that is, you get Parliament to pass a law stipulating that it's against the law to sell a sugary drink beneath a certain stipulated price. And the fourth is education. These are not mutually exclusive, so some combination might be a good idea, like, for example, education, banning or at least discouraging sugary drinks in schools combined with a tax. The main argument against taxing sugary drinks is that it's interference with individual liberty and freedom of choice. This is what the Business Roundtable and the New Zealand Initiative seem to think. People, the argument goes, should be free to make their own choices without the state acting as a nanny. This argument is simply nonsense. We already have a nanny state, and nobody sensible suggests that we should stop the state from nannying us. For example, we've got a law banning you from riding a motorcycle without a helmet. We've got a law requiring you to wear a seatbelt when you're in a car. We've got laws requiring various kinds of protective clothing in various kinds of dangerous workplace. We've got laws against dangerous drugs, laws imposing tax on liquor and tobacco. Those are all nanny state laws. People generally seem supportive of most of these laws. Quite a lot of people seem to think it might be a good idea to decriminalise possession of marijuana, and maybe other drugs too. But the arguments offered in support of that idea typically include that if we were going to decriminalise possession of marijuana, it would be possible to tax it. No one seems to object much to taxes on liquor and tobacco. Seems ironic too that the people who most object to the state nannying us seem to be often the same people who favour the theory that users ought to pay. In any event, virtually everybody seems to agree that it's a good idea for the state to nanny us in some circumstances. So the real question is not whether the state should nanny us, but when and in what circumstances, according to what criteria. My answer to this is that the state, in determining whether to protect us from ourselves, should consider two criteria. First, how harmful is the product to persons using it? And second, how expensive are the consequences for the rest of us? For example, the taxes on liquor and tobacco can be justified on the basis that these products harm the individuals that use them, and that the revenues generated by the tax would go some way towards meeting the cost of the medical care consequently required. Likewise with helmets on motorcycles and safety belts in cars. Judging by these criteria, a tax on sugary drinks would seem straightforward to justify because of the harm to the individual and the cost to the taxpayer. So, design of sugary drinks tax. The best approach, I think, would be to impose the tax on manufacturers and importers. They would increase their prices, pass the burden on to wholesalers and retailers, and the wholesalers and retailers in turn would pass the burden of the tax on to consumers. It would be possible to tax retailers and wholesalers, either as well as manufacturers and importers, or instead, but it would be much more complicated. The reason is that the number of manufacturers and importers is a relatively small number, and a relatively small number of relatively large firms for whom the burden of compliance would be relatively light. As to exactly what should be taxed, I would suggest that the tax should be confined to drinks that are carbonated and that have a sugar content of more than 2%. Some people would not adopt the former requirement and impose the tax on any drink containing sugar, or any drink containing over a certain percentage of sugar, or any drink containing over a certain percentage of added sugar. The consequence of doing it the way I suggest is that that other products, particularly fruit juices and flavoured milk drinks, would be exempt. You can argue that tax should catch those drinks, but it seems that pretty much everybody agrees that fizzy soft drinks are harmful to health and have minimal, if any, nutritional value, and there are more complicated arguments relating to fruit juices and flavoured milk drinks. As Jeff's just been talking about, that there are basically two kinds of tax. The first is an ad valorem tax, and the second is a per unit tax. Ad valorem is just a Latin term meaning according to the value. So that, for example, you could impose the tax at a percentage of the price, so 20% of the price, for example. Per unit tax would be so much per litre, so for example, $1 per litre. A sugary drinks tax could be either. I think a per unit tax would work better for some technical reasons, and $1 per litre would be a nice round number, so pending further consideration, I would suggest that would be a good rate at which to introduce such a tax. Some other aspects of the tax. The Customs and Excise Act currently provides for the taxes on liquor and tobacco and fuels, and it would be administratively and legally straightforward to extend it to cover sugary drinks. Administration would be pretty straightforward. It could be administered in the same way as a tax on liquor in particular. De minimis exemption might be a good idea to have an exemption for very small producers. So you might have somebody selling some ginger beer at a farmer's market or something like that, and you wouldn't bother trying to collect the tax from them. Some people seem to think there would be some kind of complication with the interaction of the sugary drinks tax and GST. I don't have time to go into that at the moment, but I can assure you that there are no complications with that. I can talk to you about that later if that would be helpful. It's always difficult to predict how people are going to behave in response to a change in the law. I have a hunch, however, just borne out by what Jonathan had to say a moment ago as to how manufacturers might respond. I think they might respond by modifying at least some of their products by reducing the amount of tax so as to bring themselves within the threshold. So if the threshold sugar content was 2%, they might modify some of their products so that they would contain 1-point-something% of sugar and then make good the difference with some kind of alternative sweetening product. I'm told that this would be a desirable outcome because alternative sweeteners might not be very good for you, but I'm told they're nowhere near as bad as sugar. The design of tax that I suggest is tentative only, and quite a lot more research would be needed of various kinds. Industry research, I guess what Jonathan had to say was very enlightening to me, and he's obviously a key person in this country in that regard. As regards economic research, I think Cleona and what Jeff had to say was very interesting and bears on the design of the tax, because more information about how both consumers and manufacturers and other players in the industry are likely to respond is important to take into account in designing the tax. On legal research, I'm delighted to say that, like some of the other people that have stood next to this podium today, I too am fortunate to have a most excellent student who is engaged in research of this kind. Her name's Kate. Kate, can you stand up and take a bow or wave, and that way anybody who wants to speak to Kate can do so. Kate is doing research into the legal aspects of this kind of a tax. Of course, not everybody is in favour of a tax on sugary drinks. Some people are opposed to it. I'd single out here, I think, as has already been done, for special praise, is Jonathan and his company, what Frucor are doing, I think is absolutely terrific. For others involved in the industry and the New Zealand Institute and so on, I would offer this final word. Difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Really appreciate it. Oh, okay. Great. We've got time for 2 questions. Well, that's even better. Do we have any questions?
Come back in case anybody's got one.
Yes, that's brilliant. Do we have any questions about taxing sugar? Yes.
You know when you said about changing to a lesser brand as such, does that happen with tobacco? Does they go from tail-based to...
I wasn't the one who said that. I think it might have been Jeff that said that. It'd be one of the advantages of having a per unit tax rather than an ad valorem tax is that it would lessen that effect. It still might be an effect, but it would be less of an effect. Conversely, you might say that might favour brand name manufacturers as against the supermarket-owned brand. There might be issues in there, but as regards the gap between them, between the brand products and the unbranded products, a per unit tax would minimise that difference.
Great question. Do we have another question for our speaker? Any other questions about taxing?
No takers.
No takers. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Michael. Really appreciate it.